Saul is the author of Rewiring America, speaking on, well, he will be speaking on how to fund the clean energy economy here. He's written many books and articles, and we're excited to hear his views on how to finance the clean energy transformation without saying so much. So I would ask Saul, please join us here, and looking forward to hearing what you have for us today.
Good morning, Amos. Can I just, it's 4 a.m. where I am, so I'm a little muddled. Can you remind me how much time I have?
I think, Jack, correct me or not, about 12, 15 minutes. You good? Or are we longer?
Yeah, well, we said 10 to 13 minutes and maybe time for a question or two, but if you take all 15, then there won't be any questions. So we'll see.
Yeah, 4 a.m. The ball's in your court.
All right.
Thanks for being here at 4 a.m. My goodness.
We really appreciate it.
To be close to my aging parents, we relocated to Australia temporarily. And so I'm calling in from Wollongong. Here we go. I'll share my screen. Very kind of you to talk to me, to invite me to talk about finance, but you've asked a physicist to talk about finance. So I'll give you a warning that I'm going to throw in a little bit of the science and some engineering as a way to talk about the opportunities and challenges in financing this. And I think it gives a lot of insight into the justice issues. All right. Okay, here we go. This famous Sankey diagram, it in fact was invented in the 70s to find out exactly how to solve that energy crisis. That energy crisis was the supply crisis because of the Arab oil embargo. And so they were looking at what do we have to do on the left-hand side of this diagram, which is the supply side, so that we don't disrupt the right-hand side, which is how we use energy. Electricity generation here, residential, commercial, industrial, and transportation. We didn't really change that view, and we've been using that view in some respects to think about how to fix climate change. But we really need to think about the supply side, because it's a truism that as you decarbonize the left-hand side, you need to decarbonize the right-hand side at the same rate. But in fact, if you think about it from the right-hand side, demand side backwards, it gives you new opportunities. I'm just going to flash this next slide up. We did this work with the Department of Energy. This is the same diagram, but when you literally can focus down to, how much energy school buses use, or retail food distribution, or mobile homes, versus things. So we now have that level of resolution to look at the economy, and we did that in order to figure out the best, fastest decarbonization pathways. As a quick reminder, I heard people bandy about 2050. We're going to have to keep ratcheting up our level of effort. At this point, if we started with a World War II level of effort next year, we need to be pretty much completed with decarbonization by 2040. That's if we want to hit any target under 2 degrees. There are 2 problems with the way IPCC has modeled the world and our decarbonization trajectories. One is that in the early 2000s, we allowed negative emissions to be modeled in. Let's be very frank and very honest. We do not know how to do those at scale, and not a lot of serious scientists believe we will do it economically at scale in time. The other is that we don't model in the carbon that will be emitted by machinery, including your car and your furnace and your stovetop, that already exist. That's called committed emissions. In fact, the committed emissions of the stock of machinery we already have takes us over 1.5 and perilously close to 2 degrees. What that really means is that we need to now care about something called the adoption rate. These are the technology adoption rates of things throughout history. So this dotted line here was the adoption of the landline. It took about 80 years to get one everywhere. This this black line over here is, or the gray one, is the adoption rate of the cell phone. So we went from no cell phones to nearly everyone had one in 20 years. Let me be very clear. We need to go from very few electric cars to everyone has one in 20 years. And the wind down of landlines in the same period needs to apply to internal combustion engines. Why is that? These are various adoption rates you can imagine. A magic 1 means we wake up tomorrow and we've decarbonized. That would be great. That'll stop us at 1 degree. If if we did 100% replacement at an end of life, so every time we retire a coal plant, every time we retire natural gas, we replace it in solar and wind, but it also means every time we retire an automobile, it needs to be replaced with an electric one. Every time we retire a furnace in a basement, it needs to be replaced with an electric heat pump. And honestly, you can now look at that in the context of our climate outcome. That retire everything gets us between 1.5 2 degrees, but there'll be some ramp up because we are 10 to 20 times below the production rates required to get those machines built. So we'll need a rapid sort of World War II industrialization effort. And that puts us on this dotted line here that just narrowly squeaks us below 2 degrees. So that needs to be our level of ambition. Quick piece of good news about electrification. If you electrify everything, you start with an economy out here. This is what happens when you decarbonize the electricity sector. This is what happens when you decarbonize transportation in terms of the energy reduction. Same with electrifying heat in homes. You come all the way down here. The US can actually have the same lifestyles that it does today and at about 40% of the energy use. Now, we could argue that we should try to improve everyone's lifestyle and go up to 50. But the overwhelming message here is that there's a big win in electrification. To switch to finance and economics, here's the reality of an average, this is the average, not the median US household today. $61,000, there's 2.6 people in that average household. $61,000 is what they spend after tax. A lot of that goes on things like housing and transportation, big vague categories, but you can break this down as you go further out to the right, and you can see gasoline. We spend $2,000 a year on gasoline. That's more than they spend on all the fresh food, all the fresh meat, all the fresh vegetables in the average house. $1,500 electricity is more than we spend on all of education in the average household. We spend $400 or about $550 on heating fuels, which is more than we spend on dentistry today, just to contextualize what we're going to talk about. You can actually look state by state at these expenditures, and you can even look at how they are today. The purple bar here is gasoline, the red is natural gas, the yellow is electricity. So this is how households spend money on energy across the country. And that'll be important in a minute. So, quick reminder, because you need to get to this level of specificity to make some interesting points about finance. This is the average home. It has heating oil or natural gas heating it. It has natural gas typically heating the stove. It has natural gas typically heating the hot water heater, and it has 2 cars in the garage running on diesel or gas. To get to the future we need households to look like this. Same 2 cars, but running on electricity with electric car chargers. Rooftop solar to the maximum amount of penetration we can, a heat pump for space heat, and a heat pump for water heat in the garage, probably a battery in every home. And all of this will require an upgrade to what's called the load center, or what you might know as the fuse box. So how do we get from where we are to there? How much is that going to cost is a very important question. The good news is, just like I showed you the big savings at the national level, the current household uses about 80,000 kilowatt hours of electricity a year. The future household, without changing the quality of your life in any way, will only need 20 to 25. So we get nearly a better than 3x reduction in total quantity of energy. That's the efficiency of electrification alone. So that's the good news story. Again, you can model that for every single household in the country. And it's the reason we model out the electricity use in every house as we electrify everything is we can now build an economic model of how we get to that future. Just for a quick reminder, all of the technologies that we care about, heat pumps, solar, batteries, electric vehicles, are on things known as learning rates. And a learning rate historically is defined as how much does the cost of something fall every time you double the rate of production. Solar, every time we double the rate of production of solar, we get a 22% discount. With batteries, it's 21%. With wind power, it's 17%. We need to have an 8x increase in the production rate of batteries. We need a 12x increase in the production rate of wind. We need a 16x increase in the production rate of solar. That means 3 or 4 doublings each. That means the cost of these things, just by virtue of the scale of the project to decarbonize humanity alone, more than halves the price again from where we are today, which is great news. Here, however, is the problem. If you took that household today and you went out and you tried to buy all of the capital upgrades, and this is not the whole purchase, this just means when you go to buy a heat, your water heater breaks tomorrow, you go to buy a water heater, instead of paying for the cheapest natural gas burning one, you pay the difference in price between the electric heat pump version and the current natural gas version. So we're just paying for the difference in keeping your current household lifestyle, but if you wanted to do it electrically, that would cost $80,000 a year for the average, $80,000 worth of capital investment for the average household. That puts us out of the range of where we need to be by a lot. In fact, as I'll show you later, it increases household energy costs by about $5,000 a year. By about 2024, if you had the right recipe of regulatory fixes, and I'm to emphasize regulatory fixes, I can buy solar installed on my roof in Australia today without government subsidy for under $1 per watt installed. That translates to a cost of electricity of 5 cents per kilowatt hour. In the US, the average cost of installation unsubsidized of solar is $3 to $3.50 per watt. It's the same solar cells, and in fact, you have lower salaries in Australia. Australia has a typical salary for a solar installer of $35 to $45 per hour, which is higher than what it is in the US. So this is all a regulatory own goal, if you like, in the US. It comes from our permitting challenges around solar, and it comes from inspection requirements. Australia's magic recipe was a training and certification program, which is to underscore that we need massive training and certification programs for all of the critical components of decarbonisation to not only build the workforce, but to lower what's called the soft costs. Anyway, if you had Australia's recipe for solar, California's recipe for electric vehicles, and where heat pumps are going, by about 2024, we get that capital cost down from 80,000 to 30,000, and by about 2028 to about 15,000. That's very important because of this. This is the sort of what we're doing. Here is, I'm circling the current household, $4,500 a year, the blue, a little over 1,500 or a little under 1,500 on the grid, and the rest is on the fossil fuels. And that's an annual payment that you have to make to buy those fuels. The big game we're playing here is we're substituting finance for fuels. So currently the machines are cheap, but the fuels are expensive into the future. The electrification we need is expensive machines up front that are essentially free in the future. So that means we're going to be paying via finance. Today, if you went out and you bought all of these, you decarbonized your home, it's this business as usual. You'd spend this big blue block here on your capital, and then you'd be paying interest on that forever, and it would cost you around about $5,000 extra per year. But the great news is, once we get to good or great, you'll see $1,000 in savings by 2024 per household if we do this right, and we'll see $2,500 in savings per household per year by 2028. That is a very significant amount of money to those average homes. And remember that the median household is probably probably only has about $40,000 in spending. So it's very substantial to the median home. So there's the opportunity. We can actually use these numbers, and I'm going to purposely cut it short so that I can make more commentary on this than just show you slides and data. But up here, we actually worked with some professional economists to figure out how this creates jobs. Maybe I'll go to the end goal. Nationwide, just focusing on the household, today you would create negative net jobs. Why is that? You would create a huge amount of jobs in manufacturing there in blue, a huge amount in installation, and some in finance. But because the households have to spend more money, you lose the household spending that is also a job creator. By the time we get to good, you're creating 6 million new jobs in the economy. By the time we get to this great, 7 to 8 million new jobs in the economy. Now, these are not jobs that you can export as much. These are jobs that are going to be in every zip code, because essentially they're contractor jobs. They're jobs that have to go into your basement, into your garage, into your kitchen to do installations. And so these are local jobs. They're well-paying, skilled trade jobs, and there's a lot of them. So there's a great news story there. We can actually do those job numbers by state. In California alone, that is 600 to 800,000 jobs, new jobs created. To talk about the climate impact of this, and then to come back to finance, the energy decisions made in the household account for 37%, because it's the emissions from the heating systems in the house, the electricity systems in the house, and the vehicle. So what I've just told you will get us around 40% of the way to our net zero target, and it is achievable in about 15 years and keeps us on track for 2 degrees. If you applied this same recipe to our small businesses and commerce, you'd get an additional 18 to 20. So there's 60% out of the 85% of our emissions which are energy based. So this is really lets us tackle the majority of emissions in a way that we can talk directly to people about the jobs created and directly to people around their kitchen table issues, so the air quality inside their house and inside their communities. Maybe this is the slide to now switch the conversation to finance. We looked at what is the break-even interest rate. So at what interest rate can you finance these goods in the home that breaks even on household economics? Given today's technology, you have to have a negative interest rate because they are more expensive than the incumbent. Again, about half of that problem is a regulatory own goal. So making these things easy to install and eliminating the soft cost permitting inspection will get us about halfway there. Scale will get us another 25% of the way there. And the last thing we need is a low interest rate. The great news, however, is that once we get to the good scenario, the break-even interest rate looks like above 4%. So it starts to be retail, either for good or bad, for bad reasons, but good for climate change. The economic depression has taken interest rates to the lowest they've ever been. So maybe COVID has given us a head start here, because interest rates are now 0 to 3%, and they look globally, and they look like they're going to lock in. And so that's really, at a macroscopic view of the finance, the interest rates are in a good position. I'm going to remind everyone that maybe the most important and long-lasting piece of legislation that FDR made during the original New Deal was the invention of Fannie Mae in 1936. Before 1936, the 20-year mortgage as we know it didn't exist. And we used to finance homes on balloon payment mortgages. When the market crashed, these balloon payments that came due every 5 years were coming due, and people would lose their homes. Not only that, but 25% of the American workforce worked in construction. So they the federal government and FDR wanted to put money back into communities, and they wanted to put money back into building. And so they invented and conceived of the modern 20-year mortgage, largely based on the auto loan that Alfred P. Sloan invented to elevate GM over Ford in the auto loan world. The invention of the federally backed mortgage basically was a declaration that the American home was part of the American infrastructure. What I'm really trying to say is an incredibly important piece of what we can do in a Green New Deal is declare that the rest of these electric devices should be given that same unique status as the home, which means that the federal government can guarantee it. That gives access to low credit households, low credit rating households much more easily, and gives us an opportunity to afford these high ticket items. Many people from the climate justice movement will probably be aware that the the way we rolled out the mortgages and financing in this country was by no means colorblind and was quite problematic. We absolutely have to do that better this time, but we know what went wrong last time and we have an opportunity to fix it. Maybe I'll just come back to this original slide. I'm going to finish with the household we need to end up with, because we can make some interesting.
Oh God, one at a time, Jesus.
Uh-oh.
Oh no, I got that one already.
Here we go. Let's look at these devices. Stoves and ovens, water heaters, air conditioners, it's understood, are typically purchased under distress. So the piece of machinery fails. The average, 40% of American homes have less than $400 to tap in case of an emergency. It's probably the middle of winter or the middle of summer, and you probably have a pregnant house member who says, we need, I need a stove tomorrow, or I need a hot water heater tonight. And so the purchasing experience for people is they go to find the cheapest one they can afford, which ends up being a natural gas burning or a fossil fuel burning device. That is to emphasize that I gave you this macroscopic idea about financing, and then yes, we'd like to macroscopically get a federally guaranteed rate and have everything bought on mortgage, but it's worthy to say that we need to think about the point of purchase experience. We need this financing to be available at the point of purchase so that the technologies that we need for the future are cheaper as you buy them, for everyone who needs it. And in a strange way, how I've come to see these LMI, low middle income, access to these technology issues, it comes down to how we shape point of purchase finance and novel payment schemes to make sure that the right technology is cheaper for the household. I think it's also incredibly important to note that there are three sets of people who could benefit from those savings, those household savings I told you about, that $1,000 to $2,500. There are three people lining up to try and get that money. One of them are the banks who'd like to make that money as their margin in finance. One of them are the companies that would like to sell you or lease you these pieces of machinery. And then the third player, which is the one that I hope wins the economic benefit, is the household itself. And so we really need to think about the financing schemes that allow and enable the homeowners or the renters to end up owning these pieces of infrastructure for themselves. So they're benefiting from these big energy savings into the future and taking that economic benefit into their household. I'll stop there. There's a lot of thoughts. I think I just fire hosed you all with a whole lot. And I'm very happy to take questions. And honestly, these are early days where we're still working through these issues and brainstorming. So I appreciate everyone's experience on this call in helping shape new ideas that we can turn into local and federal policies to get the future we all deserve.
Saul, this is just personally from me to you. People say when I get done presenting, it's like drinking from a fire hose. That was Niagara Falls, my friend. That was awesome.
Sorry, everyone.
No. Your slides. I'm a geek and data nerd myself. Your slides were phenomenal. And that was really over the top. Please make sure we get a copy of those so we could reshare that. Everyone, yes, we'll try to get a copy of those from Saul for you. We'll put that link up on our website at CEMTF.org. I also want to thank you again from my heart, but for coming from 4 a.m., which means you probably got online at 3 a.m. So don't cut yourself short there. And we could see the sun just now dawning over your shoulder as you had just
right
here.
Nearly time for me to go and have a surf. Right.
There you go. We would normally take questions, but we're going to have to move right on to Dana Joya. But again, you can see in the chat, if anyone, you can see your applause in there. Congratulations. We really do appreciate all that you've brought here. And this is recorded, everyone. So you can visit, again, this recording of Saul's presentation on our website as well in the days to come. So thank you again, Saul, and really appreciate all that you do and your work.
Sorry, I went a little over time, and thank you all for your on the ground work. As much as we think this is going to happen at federal policy, this is going to be community by community, and it's about local building codes. And we need you all to turn up to utility regulatory hearings, and we need to overturn the utility monopoly.
Here you have it. Well, thanks
guys.
again, Saul. We really appreciate you.
All right.